Alright, so if you're like me, you may occasionally suffer from what is best known as a messy desk. Well, in this video I'm going to make what I would class as my ultimate desk tidy, and I think it's pretty much a guarantee that you've not seen a desk tidy like this. You've got some classic ones such as these ones, but the one I'm going to make today, I guarantee will be different. And I'm going to be making out of two different species of wood, sapele and American maple. First off, measuring out and cutting the base. They do say that you need to start at the bottom and work your way up, and so that's what I did. I've used sapele plenty in the past before I'd started doing YouTube, and sometimes you just forget how much of a nice wood that sapele is to use. Now that I've got the widths cut, I'm going to cut all the components to length. Then after that, be onto the thicknesser to get the thickness down to 15 mils. And if you want to buy these plans, I will have them available on Buy Me a Coffee at the link below in the description. Yeah, I'll mention more about Buy Me a Coffee later on, but firstly I am actually gutted that I lost the table saw footage. But don't worry, there is some other table saw footage later on the video. Hooray! By the time this video is released, I would have been working on this project for about a month. This has been for a number of factors. The first one being that when I started it, I had just recovered from a shoulder injury. Therefore I had to take things easy and try not to re-injure the shoulder. Then I had a couple of weeks where I had worked longer hours at my full-time job. I know, poor me, which limited the time I could get into my workshop. Now I'm going to mark out where I'm going to be routing out the little joints. I can't remember what they're called, but I'll put a note below here of what they're actually called. And I'll be using my Mortise router plane to make the little grooves in the base and the sides, and I think the shelf as well. But I'm going to start off just working on the base to start off, and then I will move on to the other parts and hope it works. I always think that actually using one of the side pieces to mark out the actual thickness makes for better accuracy. Making sure the piece doesn't move when making the mark is a different matter, as sometimes it can slip a little bit. Can you believe that for a split second I did consider marking out one area, working on that, and then marking out the rest of the areas. Then I woke up and marked it all out, remembering to measure twice, mark once, kind of, maybe I mark twice sometime.
The reason why I'm making notes on the plans is due to changing the distances by a couple of millimetres, but I needed to make sure that I knew exactly what they were for future reference. As I'm going to be using a router plane, I decided to chisel the ends because I had a fear that when I used the plane it would go past the line, and then that would be classed as being a classic mistake that I would make, and also that would ruin it. I have to say that the Veritas router plane is a fantastic bit of kit. You just have to remember that when using it not to lower the plane too much, as it will try to take obviously too much material off and it will easily get stuck. Just have the mindset to take your time, taking thin shavings every time, and it can take a while to do it. Chiseling out any excess that the plane has missed just to tidy the mortise up. It's always a good thing to keep the chisels nice and sharp.
One eternity later.
This was a mistake. Keep watching to find out why.
The original idea was to make the joint the same width as the router plane, but that hasn't quite worked out. As the router plane is 12 mils wide, that was going to be the width of the actual tenon joint, and to remove the small part of the joint, I tried to use a shorter plane. It hasn't worked out very well, as you can see from this little bit of footage. So now I'm going to make the tenon joints just the 15 mil, which is the width of the bits of wood of the side panels and the divider.
At this stage I thought that I would be best just to mirror transfer the joint area from the base to the divider. Would you use this method, or would you just mark out the joint on the divider from your plans? As I mentioned earlier in the video, I have made the plans available to buy on Buy Me a Coffee for a small fee. This is the first time that I've made any plans available. If you don't want to buy the plans but you would like to support what I do, then consider just buying me a coffee. Every donation, big or small, goes directly into helping me create even more videos just like this one. The links are in the description below.
I've gone ahead and prepared the other tenons that need cutting. I've also marked up the mortises on the shelf, which will be the top and the bottom of the shelf. But to show a different way of cutting the tenons compared to how I did it before with the hand saws, I'm going to cut them this time on the bandsaw.
I really wanted to show the different ways that some of the tasks can be done. I know that some creators might make the cuts on the bandsaw and then follow up with, if you don't have a bandsaw, you could do this with a handsaw. I had to be different though.
So it's not only the tenons which we're going to cut differently at this time, we're also going to do the mortises. So before I use the router plane, which when it's a small mortise it can be a bit awkward to get in there, so this time I'm going to use a palm router. Not just handheld by itself, but using a router jig as well. So let's see how this goes. Hopefully it'll be okay.
After I had finished, I remembered that what I should have done was set up a jig similar to what I used for the router plane and use a guide bushing so that I didn't go over the lines. By the way, you don't see me using the palm router very often, and there is a good reason for that. A couple of years ago I was using a similar setup but with a ball bit. The perspex was a lot thinner, the bit bounced off the wood, hit my left hand just down from the thumb and sliced it open. I was lucky that it missed all of the nerves, although my nerves were shot, and it took me over 1 year before I used the palm router again. We learn from our mistakes. Moving on, I have to mark up and then route out the mortises on the side panels, and yes, I've gone back to the router plane as I feel safer with it. I'm also getting quite a bit of satisfaction from manual woodworking. Shock horror. Sanding time is here again. Oh yes, it's everyone's favourite pastime, going from 80 grit to 120 and then 240 grit. I still don't have any 180 grit or higher than 240. Maybe they could be on my shopping list from donations on Buy Me a Coffee. At times I wish I had some of the glue that's used with dark wood, but then I do use Gorilla Glue, and part of the appeal is that when they're dry the residue becomes invisible, unless of course you shine a UV light on it. This is one of those times when I wish I had a larger workshop, instead of the single car garage that was built in the 60s when cars were a lot smaller in the UK. I would prefer to have the base laid out so that it was an easy transition to move the rest of the frame onto it. Oh, and I don't think I have enough clamps. Now I did promise earlier in the video that even though I had lost some table saw footage, that there was some to come, and here it is. Onto the drawers, and again these were ripped on the table saw. The reason for ripping on the table saw is due to the bandsaw drifting really badly. I put it down to need a new blade, which I now have, and good news is that tests after installing the new blade have been successful.
Okay, so the next stage is doing the drawers. Now I have already made one with gravers in for the base. Obviously no base in it yet, but I wanted to do one first just to make sure I knew exactly the methods I was going to use. I've actually used miters on the sides. The next thing we're going to do is cut these pieces for the next one. I've already got some out for another drawer, and I might be short, and there's a reason for that. Not because I haven't got the wood, but I've just changed my table saw blade and it rattles, so I'll need to sort that.
Well, you probably already guessed, but the reason why the blade was rattling was because when I was fastening the bolt, that keeps it in place, it had slipped. It's now corrected and working fine. So that's the bandsaw and table saw sorted. Get in. This is simply marking up the miters, setting a stop block on the miter saw and cutting them. Who asked for more sanding? Well, this is for you. I've got to admit that this next bit gives a lot of satisfaction, similar to using a router plane, as I used a shoulder plane to make the rebate for the base to go into. If you want to know another method of doing the rebate, well, you could do it on a router table, and I've used that method in the past. Then it's just simply gluing up the box. I use the green tape for quick assembly, but also use the frame clamps for my SB to make sure that it's square. Now I could either wait until one drawer is dry and then use the clamps on the next one, or just use the tape method on the others. I was lazy and used the tape, which showed how good Matt's clamps are, as one of the tape drawers was a bit out of line, so I had to redo that drawer and use Matt's clamps to get it nice and square. Then onto the bases. A couple were two panels grouped together, whilst the others were just a single piece, ripped on the table saw. I had cut these oversized and then just planed down the edges until they fitted. Now you could also plane them down using a shooting ram, but I don't have a good one. I need to make a proper one. But as soon as I got the bases to fit each drawer, I just glued them on and clamped up. I need more clamps. At this stage of sanding the back panel, I felt that it was the start of the final phase, which lasted a while. Once I got it sanded, I then had to put it up to the back of the unit and mark off where to trim it down to. Once that was done, it was then time just to glue it onto the back. I had thought about gluing it and nailing it, but I just went with the glue. Okay, these little dowels aren't meant to be the actual drawer handles, but the finished result is they do look good. I was supposed to turn some Sapili on the lathe, but I've learned that I need a spindle rough and gouge, which I have to wait till payday to buy, and there's also supposed to be a pen holder, but again that was going to be done on the lathe, so they will come in a separate video in about 2 or 3 weeks time. And now, I'll let you enjoy some music with the video until near the end. But once again, here is the messy desk, including my 3D printer, which has been dormant for some time, moving on to the nice and tidy desk. And if you've been puzzled about the extra part of the base, it was to hold my speed editor that I use for editing videos, but you could use it for post-its or a notebook. I do hope that you've enjoyed this video, and if you have stayed till the end, well bloody done. And until the next time, Gan Cannyman.